Welcome everybody. It's my great pleasure to welcome everybody to this session here tonight. My name's Claire Holland. I'm the current chair of Mediators Beyond Borders Oceania, and we have the goal as an organisation to contribute to the thought leadership and to support people in their practice around peace building activities and conflict management and resolution across the Oceania region. And as part of Mediators Beyond Borders Oceania, we have a number of particular working groups where people who are quite passionate about a particular interest can join together with other like-minded people to try and further a particular project. And so Joanne Law has actually been responsible for a working group with MBBO around experiential learning and an opportunity for people to share what they've been doing in practice with a greater audience than they might otherwise reach. It's also an opportunity for us to hear innovative ways that people are doing their practice across different contexts, which is absolutely wonderful. And so tonight, it's my great pleasure to introduce Hieng, who is going to talk to us tonight about a particular project that you've been involved in down in Melbourne. And I'm sure that when we hear and we get to converse and talk a little bit about your experience, we'll be able to think about lots of different ways that there's application for some of those learnings to be implemented and shared and thought of around different people's contexts. So thank you so much for giving us your time to share your experiences and expertise tonight. I'll quickly just hand over to Joanne. If there's anything else you'd like to add, Joanne, before we start the session. Thank you.
No, just the irony that we're working to give people a voice so they can be heard, and my voice is gone. So I'll hand over to you, Hieng.
Hieng Lim.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Okay. All right. I'd like to acknowledge elders, past and present. I'm on Wurundjeri Woiwurrung, and it's really important that we continue acknowledging country. I guess having worked with Aboriginal community for a long time, it's just been a scar in our consciousness, and the sooner we heal that, the more peaceful our community and our way forward together is going to be. I do want to also acknowledge the NJC, which allowed me to do this work, and especially my former director, Kerry Walker, who was very supportive. I am thankful for all the wisdom in this room, and my presentation is really a hope that there's something worthwhile to share, and I really appreciate that all of you are making time to share in this conversation. I want to also thank Joanne and Claire and MBBO for allowing me to be part of the experiential learning conversation. So having said that, I'm just going to begin by showing a video. Hopefully it works. Okay, now this video is going to take about 8 minutes, so just enjoy.
walla walla, yada yada go, yada yada go, yada yada go, yada yada go. Walla walla, yada yada go, yada yada go, yada yada go. Walla walla, yada yada go, yada yada go, yada yada go, yada yada go. Walla walla, yada yada go, yada yada go, yada yada go. Walla walla, yada yada go, yada yada go, yada yada go, yada yada go. Walla walla, yada yada go, yada yada go, yada yada go. Walla walla. Walla walla, yada yada go, yada yada go, yada yada go. Walla walla, yada yada go, yada yada go, yada yada go, yada yada go. Walla walla, yada yada go, yada yada go, yada yada go. Walla walla, yada yada go, yada yada go, yada yada go, yada yada go. Walla walla, yada yada go, yada yada go, yada yada go. Walla walla.
Any comments or questions? That was just to the beginning, and just really to show the chief aim of the working group and how it began. So my hope for tonight is that we share a conversation, and the more questions you ask, the more you'll probably get out of me, and I'm happy to answer any question. One proviso is that if you have any issue with whatever I'm saying, I'm the one responsible. And if you have any issue with what I say, whether that's related to the Aboriginal community or anything else that you know of, please email me, and it's got nothing to do with MBBO or Joanne. So yeah, please share in the conversation and ask as many questions as you can. So we'll go forward now. So just contextually, Smith Street, do we all know Smith Street in Collingwood?
I think we've got quite a few people from Queensland and other places, so probably not.
Okay. I'll give you a bit of context. Okay. Smith Street is the border street between Collingwood and Fitzroy. And it used to be a very troubled street in the sense that everyone wanted to avoid it. And the reason it was a troubled street was there was a lot of assaults, a lot of public drinking, a lot of drug dealing, a lot of crime. It had Collingwood itself and Fitzroy had the highest crime rate in the state, triple the crime rate in the state. So the reason the Neighbourhood Justice Centre was built close to that area was specifically to deal with the high crime rate. And the Neighbourhood Justice Centre itself, which is on the corner of Wellington and Johnson Street, next to the Tote being a pub on the corner of Wellington and Johnson Street, is very much built to deal with a high crime. And it's a model for what's called community justice. To give you a bit of background, Collingwood and Fitzroy were really poor areas up until about 20 years ago. There's now gentrification. It's pretty central to Melbourne. It's about probably 10 to 15 minutes walk from the centre of Melbourne out to Collingwood. So in terms of accessibility to Melbourne, it's quite accessible. What is characterised by the high public housing density, there's three groups of high rises situated in Fitzroy, in Collingwood, and in Richmond. And if Richmond Victoria Street, that's where all the current drug activities are occurring, and where also the MSIR, the medically supervised injecting room, has been experimented on and being built there. It's saving many lives, but that's Victoria Street. Smith Street, for decades upon decades, was a really poor area. And Smith Street itself is a trading street, but yet it's got this very chic, rakish, rogue-like street that's full of characters, whether they're criminal. It is said that in 2000, Bob Dylan came to Smith Street and he fitted right in amongst the locals and people couldn't tell who he was. So that's the kind of street it was. And certainly it was a high crime street and a lot of overdoses. And in particular, there was on the corner of Stanley and Smith Street is where the Aboriginal community gathers outside of Safeway. Now, the reason they gather there is partly because Safeway used to provide, well, they still provide an alcohol outlet, and community would purchase alcohol, sit there and drink there. But it's also considered a gathering place. And you can see from the slide that I've shown is that if you Google it now, Smith Street, can you see what's under once a trouble street? Can
The
you
list
see
of news items, police launch,
investigation?
protesters.
Yeah, so that's just a sample. I'm just giving that as a sample of, if you type in trouble in Smith Street, it's still coming up with, you can see there that in 2023 and then so on and so forth. And if you look where I click, it says the age 2005, that gave about the time when 2 years before the Neighbourhood Justice Centre began. And then in 2012 is when I began my work with the community and down in Smith Street. So that just to give a bit of context about what it used to be and what it's going to be shown to be in the near future. So a troubled street, full of drugs, full of assaults, full of shops there, full of begging. The 86 tram goes down to La Trobe University and RMIT University. And the 86 tram is famous because between Gertrude Street and down all the way to Johnson Street, it's a lot of homeless people used to jump on, and It's famous because it smelt like urine during the trips, and it really is because homeless people did not have anywhere to wash, and they would get on and off. They'd be drunk and they'd be disorderly. So that's the kind of street that we're talking about in 2012. Now, that's been decades and upon decades of really difficult, what a difficult street it was. Okay. The response by the council at the time was that they wanted to a ban on public drinking. It was initiated by angry traders in Smith Street. They met the Yarra City Council and they said they wanted public drinking banned. The council refused because they didn't want to be perceived to be targeting one sector of the community. And then, of course, given what I've said, that Smith Street and Gertrude Street were meeting places. So Gertrude Street, up until about 2000, had most of the Aboriginal services, and the fig tree at the exhibition building that is directly pointing down Gertrude Street is where Pastor Douglas used to actually preach to his community. And if Douglas, he was the governor of South Australia and a prominent Aboriginal man, uncle and great-grandfather of many descendants in the Aboriginal community. And Gertrude Street extends down Smith Street. And if you imagine the Redfern Square in Sydney, the square in Melbourne could probably be said to be between Gertrude Street, Smith Street, Johnson Street, and Nicholson Street. So that would be equivalent to the square. I'm showing you a picture of what it became. This is Uncle Joe Boy on the left there, an elder in the community. You saw him also in the video I just showed. You also saw Di Harris, the vice president of the Smith Street Business Association at the time. And you can see there on the right, that's Peter Becker, the senior sergeant and in charge of the Collingwood Police Station. Now, and you can see there, that's a happy picture of them all together. The question is, how did we get here to this picture? And so I'm going to give you a bit of a background. The first thing to say is this picture here is being used by me only for purposes. It's not the actual incident that I witnessed. So I apologize in advance for any impropriety in using this image. I've taken this from an article that's referenced there in my PowerPoint. And my journey into this work began with my director, Kerry Walker, asking me to attend the Smith Street Business Association meetings. And they were having trouble with all that I had described to you earlier about the troubled street. And one day I was on Smith Street visiting a $2 gift shop, one of those ones that sell all kinds of cheap things. And on the corner of Stanley and Smith Street, and I witnessed an arrest. And in that arrest, an Aboriginal man and an Aboriginal woman appeared to be screaming at each other. There was no physical violence, but they were screaming at each other. They appeared to be intimate partners. And because they were screaming at each other, within about 5-10 minutes, 3 divvy vans arrived. And the divvy vans stopped in front of the man. Immediately got down on his knees and put his hands on his head. And the police came and screamed at him and then used the captain's phrase to order him to obey, which he was already submitting to. Now that's one. And then, so they put those two in the back of the divvy van. And then as I was witnessing this, another Aboriginal elder man walked past and looked inside the divvy van. And The police asked him, "What do you want? Why are you hanging around?" What he said was, "I'm just checking on to see if they're my family." So in the argy-bargy of it, they told him to stop. He was arrested. He was put in the back of a divvy van, but for some reason, I don't remember him kicking or anything, but they dragged him out again, and then they tied his hands behind his back, and they tied his ankles with zip locks. And then they left him lying there, and it was a 35, 38 degree summer day. It was hot. I went over, and this is after about 15 minutes, I said, "Can we just let him sit up?" And I was told to, excuse my language, fuck off and not interfere with police business. The other thing about this man was, because he was being arrested, they knelt on his neck and left him on the tarmac in the hot sun for about 40 minutes. And that was a bit much for me, and that's why I spoke up. And that's where my journey into the work got interesting. I subsequently reported it to my director, and then we called a meeting and had a conversation with local inspector, who you saw in the picture before, Inspector Bernie Edwards, and then nothing ever came of it. Nothing. I went through to the Koori Justice Unit, nothing ever came of it. Nothing came of the report I made. And one of the complications of the work was, well, how do we deal with a situation like this? The inspector that we spoke to said it was police from outside of his jurisdiction. The main challenge was that these police were not acting in a de-escalating manner, but rather escalated things and made it worse for those being arrested. And I had to think about, what could we do to make a difference? Now, at the same time, I was working with Troy Austin and a few other community leaders. And what they were experiencing was that when they go out to work as Aboriginal liaison officers or as social workers or drug and alcohol workers, they were being targeted by the police as suspected of also being dealers. And so they couldn't do their job properly because they faced the challenge of getting arrested and being stopped from doing their work. From there, I started creating a kit to put these people in this kit so that the police would recognize them and not interfere with their work, or at least facilitate it and allow them to do their work when they go about doing it. So we went from station to station and introduced each of them to the police station. That worked well. At Smith Street Business Association meeting, I was introduced to a few traders that was complaining that the businesses were dying because of all the antisocial behavior, the drug taking, the drinking, and all the crime in the street. And they said they could not make a living. So here's the three-way dilemma that we had. When we went to communities, said, we gather here because this is our place of belonging. And they said, before the tram tracks were laid down, before these buildings went up, this was our land. Now, you can't argue with that. The second was when we talked to traders, said, we have a right to trade. And all this poor behavior is not allowing us to make a decent living. And when you talk to police, they're just here to do our job. So you can see that everyone had a valid position, a valid reason to do what they do. The issue was they didn't have a way of moving forward together. And that's when I conceived of, okay, the reason why we disrespect one another is because we don't know each other. We haven't spent time together. We don't actually respect each other, and we don't look at each other as human beings. Secondly, we all bleed red. We all eat the same type of food. We're human beings. And that despite our skin being black our uniform being blue, whatever. And we needed to look at each other as human beings. I began to set up the Smith Street Working Group. And the way I set that up was to build single relationships with each of the people that I was going to invite. So the uncles and the aunties, the police sergeants, and the traders. And then I began to, after a few months of really walking on eggshells with each other and introducing it to each other, we had a monthly gathering where we shared meals. And this is where it's really important that we do share meals. It just changes the dynamics. And you've got to share it regularly. You can't just share one meal. You've got to normalize the relationship of respect. And you've got to totally express the terms of respect for each other. So I was the one who would go all in and say, Uncle Joe Boy, Uncle Eugene, Uncle Colin, and people thought it was strange. Now, culturally, anybody who's an older person than me, I'm required to call them by their title. So it was okay for me. But for the traders and for the senior sergeants, it was difficult. But after a while, they got used to it because they knew that referring to them also by their name and by their sergeant rank, for example, was also a term of respect. Are there any questions so far about what's happened?
Hi there, this is Judith talking. I hope you can hear me. I'm just absolutely fascinated by the story. I'm already thinking about how it may apply to a street here in Cairns, and I'm happy for you to just keep talking about your experience. So I just wanted to say that I'm listening, but I'm really happy to just listen and not ask any questions right now.
That's really helpful, Judith. That really is helpful. So I'll keep going, and just stop me if there are any questions. Just put your hand up or just yell out. Once we set up the Smith Street Working Group, it took about 12 months of working together, and we often met in the street, and that was because we needed to go where people were. So that alone is the difference. We needed to go to meet the elders where they sat, which was on the corner of Stanley and Smith Street, where they gathered. Often they could be drunk and under the influence, but often also they were sober and quite informative in what they shared. Archie Rouge said, you might be driving past and seeing a group of black fellas getting together and drinking, but for him, he said, for me, this is where I find family, and this is where I learn my roots. And them older fellas knew more about me than I knew about myself. As a gathering place, Smith Street is a place where people came from interstate and from faraway regional Victoria to find family. And because families from the stolen generation, they come to Gertrude and Smith Street to try to look for those that were stolen, or if there's any connections to their ancestors in Smith Street, because this is clearly the street where Aboriginal people gather and belong, and there's a lot of Aboriginal services in that street. We began with conversations. We began with guarded, you this, you that, and then after a while, we began working together. One of the outcomes we wanted was a kit for police to recognize and use so they don't interfere with workers. Secondly, we wanted a mentorship for traders so that new traders don't come into the street and start screaming, not in my backyard, but I only just got my backyard when you've been here for thousands of years. So a lot of the screaming and complaining were by traders who were new to the street. So we wanted to have mentorship by existing businesses that could then introduce new businesses to a history of the street and what it's like to trade and live and work in the street. That I realized was something that would be useful for new businesses.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, sure.
Did you have much resistance to pull together the working group?
Oh, yes, very much. I'll go an aside now because I think it's a really important question. And this is why I've said that the more questions you ask, the better I'm able to share. What I found was it was difficult to win over everyone, and every single one was hard work. Every single one is hard work. So I want to step aside a bit and say that you have to have a set of skills. And I'm not saying I'm special, I'm just saying to do this work, we need persistence. We need drive. We need a belief that we can do it. And we need to then win hearts and minds and bring people along. And you've got to do that. Look, I think you can say by hook or by crook, but it's not really by crook, because winning hearts and minds, it's about integrity and authentic, I guess, leadership. And it's not even leadership, it's servant leadership. It's service, it's through service only. And there's no pride, there's no ego, it's got to be full humility and be open to corrections at all times, and yet keep persisting. It certainly does drain you over time, but I did that for 25 years, and I think this is why it's so worth sharing what I've learned. It may be of some use. Look, I'm glad that I've got the chance to do that. Yeah, definitely there were a lot of resistances, and I'll share with you what those resistances are. So with the police, they're divided by stations. For example, in the city of Yarra, there are 3 stations: Richmond, Fitzroy, and Collingwood. And each are governed or looked after by a senior sergeant. Now, the senior sergeants may or may not get along with all other senior sergeants, or may not get along with the inspector oversees the whole area and has many other concerns other than what we're just talking about. Getting a coordinated response from police means you've got to win over all the senior sergeants and the inspector, and also the crew that drives the divvy vans. Yeah. And the one thing that police dislike most is someone who think they know better than them. So you imagine the resistance here. And this is why I'm sharing, because there's never a moment where we allow our ego to, and when I say we, I'm talking myself and my team only being one other person, which was Marie, on the crime prevention and community justice team, that basically built solid relationship right throughout. So with the traders, similarly, different traders have different agenda items. Some, we had Di, who was assaulted pretty much every day, who had shop theft and chased people down the street and try to get her items back and all of that, but became a very active champion afterwards. But then you've got other traders who just wanted to ride on the coattail of the success and then criticize when it's not working. So you have a mix of all of that. That's why I'm saying you can't let those things stop you. You've got to be pretty pig-headed and thick-skinned and then just believe that it can be done. Because I'll tell you, on the Aboriginal community side, I took this idea of forming the Smith Street Working Group to an established Aboriginal controlled working group, which still exists today. Yeah. And when I proposed it, this is what I was told. You're thinking of doing what? You're going to put another project on us? We're not going to another one of your projects. Now, maybe I was really naive, but I just went ahead. And this is why I'm so grateful to someone like Kerry Walker, who supported me and said, just do it. So you need a boss, you need support behind you to say, just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a couple of questions. Hang on.
I do have some questions there. Okay, so any insights into how respectful communication protocols were able to be negotiated and accepted across the different interest groups you mentioned? I'll begin with generalizations. The generalization is that I think in all my experiences, everyone wants to be respected. Everyone wants to be treated and recognized as somebody. Okay. And everyone can throw a tantrum if they don't get that. So when I said I used to build relationships in parallel, so with the elders, I would go and sit and listen to them for 4 hours on Smith Street and have a chat with them and then find out what they're interested in, and then keep inviting them and keep saying, we're trying to do this work, it'll have this impact. What do you think? How can I reach further to community to get this consultation working? And just sit with them and sit with them and sit with them and sit with them and persist every day. And at times I used to get slapped so many times. I don't mean physically, but I just slapped down into my place and then just say, this is not yours to do. You don't do this to our community. You don't know anything. So one of the things I learned was I definitely don't belong in the Aboriginal community. As much respect as I give, I definitely also don't belong as a trader and I don't belong as a policeman. But what I think the role that we can play is as a facilitator to bring them all together and hold that space that is safe, that is almost sacred, but not in that sacred kind of woo-woo way, but this is an important space for discussion and peace to be realized, to be possible, that we're sitting together in a shared space and share meals is already way beyond what we do every day. So what the final outcome, just to give you a quick snapshot, is that so what used to happen was I spoke about the local law 8 bylaw being introduced, and that was to stop people drinking in public. And in effect, all it did was target Aboriginal people because they often were homeless and were drinking in public. Now, that happens, and we've already had this evaluated by the Khmer group evaluation team, and it actually showed that it actually definitely targeted Aboriginal people. So that's a fact. That Khmer report is available if you look it up. The police used to walk down the street and they would just take the drinks away, get them to pour them out. That's the most de-escalated. But the most escalated is they get Aboriginal who get arrested, and then you end up with things like death in custody and a lot of other physical violence as they're being arrested. And that was something we wanted to do differently. There's really good questions coming in now. Let me answer them one at a time. Claire, does that answer your question, Claire?
Yes, thank you. That was great discussion.
Yeah. Okay, now I'm going to Judith. How many people participate in the working group? There was about 12 to 13. So what I did was I had the 3 different groups: police, traders, Aboriginal community members and elders, but also I had professionals, partners and stakeholders. So I had community elders, I had 2 police sergeants and senior sergeants from Collingwood and Fitzroy, because that street bordered Collingwood and Fitzroy. I had the Salvation Army. I had the Traders Association there, Di Harris, and the president at the time. I had Fitzroy Legal Service. And this is all about, what it did was it impacted on the service provision of other stakeholders. And they saw what could be done. And that's really important, that you begin to create this ripple effect of culture in that room. And then you walk into that room having a particular expectation and worldview, and you know you're safe. And then you come out inspired. Now, the facilitator and convener, Judas, was me, basically. And yeah, I pretty much did all the work, but also did the admin work as well. But my primary focus was strong relationships of integrity, trust, and safety. I'm wondering how the project got the broader community involved. Were there any efforts to promote it or get people engaged? Alex, definitely. It's probably a good time now for me to show the next video. Nalika, can I answer your question about cultural competing interests and cultural aspects after the video?
Yes, no problem.
On the night of Hieng's presentation, we had some difficulties sharing the video, so here it is.
Aboriginal elders, local traders, police and the community gathered in Collingwood on the weekend to celebrate the rich Indigenous history of the area at the second annual Smith Street Dreaming. Local icon Uncle Jack Charles, musicians Joe Geyer, Bart Willoughby, Delane Briscoe and a host of local performers teamed up for the event that promotes friendship and understanding. Kerry Lee Harding was there for NITV. Hello from Smith Street Dreaming here on Smith Street, Collingwood. A deadly day has been had from community members from right across Melbourne as they've come together for a community concert here today in the city to celebrate Smith Street Dreaming, a local collaboration between community members, stakeholders and traders in Smith Street.
I found my first roots, of my Aboriginal, the fact that I had Aboriginal family when I first came into Collingwood, Fitzroy when I was 17. And we're still here. We come and celebrate our connection to country, our kinship, community spirit here in Collingwood, Fitzroy.
There's a push for areas like Fitzroy to be gentrified, for a mob of people that really have been lucky, have been fortunate. Aboriginal people aren't been unfortunate, so our history in this place, Black Fitzroy, can't be denied. Having a festival like this reaffirms our connection to our country, reaffirms our connection to urban dwelling, and reaffirms my identity.
It goes way, way back to prior to colonisation, but since colonisation, we used to see the mob out on the street. They'd be getting thrown in the back of a divvy wagon instead of seeing what we're seeing today. So yeah, in terms of that, it's been great.
Before, the police weren't in a relationship with the traders weren't in relationship with the local parkies, the Justice Centre. All these key people in the community are now together with big hearts who all love Smith Street. When you have a big heart, anything's possible. A whole range of deadly acts have come together today, including Delane Briscoe, Nikki Ashby, Joe Geyer, and Bart Willoughby and Emma Donovan. Dancing alongside people they probably would never have even thought that they could do. And I mean, this hip-hop thing, routine that they're all learning together. My kids are in there with all these strangers and they're all doing one thing together. That's amazing.
It means a lot to come out of the woodwork and show that we're still here.
Smith Street, Collingwood, this is Kerry Lee Harding, NITV News, Melbourne.
I'm going to answer Nalika's question now. Nalika, it was with great difficulty. Nalika's question was, how did we deal with the cultural aspect and the cultural differences?
What you see here today is a coming together of people from all different cultures, people from all different lifestyles who've come together here for the third year in a row to say that it is important for us to celebrate the rich diversity, which is so much an attractor of people not only to come and live here in Fitzroy and Collingwood, but also for people to visit as well.
We try not to make it political or religious or anything. It's just people having a good day, enjoying Aboriginal music and the stories being told through the songs. Yeah, no, Smith Street's got a lot of stories.
I think what's beautiful about the story with Uncle Archie is it's gorgeous how things come full circle. He can come onto a stage and share his story and have an impact and empower people to move in the right direction, to build better relationships with Indigenous Australians. And Uncle Archie's an example of it all just coming full circle, which is beautiful.
All that work that culminated in Smith Street Dreaming, where the trouble was starting to be behind us and we could all come together as a community. And I remember last year standing back, seeing the whole community together with this amazing electric buzz, stepping back thinking our work is almost done, because that would have never happened 3 years ago.
It's ultimately been driven by the community, which is the police, the Aboriginal community, the businesses, the Neighbourhood Justice Centre, community service organisations and residents, and they've all got together and made it happen. I think the model that's developed here, and it hasn't been adopted, it's grown and developed obviously, is something that could happen elsewhere, and it's something that the council could facilitate in places like Victoria Street, where there are different but similar issues about public behaviour and conflicts in the street there.
You could pick up what we've achieved here and use it in other locations. You could transfer it across, because you need to then build relationships with police and be on the same page. You need to talk to residents, what's their feeling about what's happening there, is there anything can be done? And before you know it, you have people join together that can really make a difference, because the police culture has to be part of the solution as well as the community's culture and the traders' culture. They have a lot more ability to create solutions if they're joined together as one rather than all individual people. So it really is a formula that could be used across different precincts.
Yeah, the model can definitely be taken to other areas for sure. We've seen a transition from Smith Street from a number of years ago, where we did have issues here. The street is now, and this is not just by police, but traders and the public and many groups as well, have agreed that the atmosphere and the safety and the culture has really lifted. The perception of Smith Street's a much better area to live in, much better place to go to shop, and it's just a much more vibrant atmosphere. And there's no reason why we couldn't use this model and other models to use it elsewhere, and also promote and enhance other communities as well.
Why not have a Smith Street Dreaming Festival, or what's another common street? Main Street? Main Street Festival? I don't think Mr. Main would mind too much.
We're trying to get the working group to sort of take over that responsibility in conjunction with the community, to own the festival themselves and become a non-for-profit group and source their funding, to run this festival. But how could you not have it again? 500 people come for a festival on Smith Street in an afternoon.
There's been too many differences, and because of the differences, that's it's great to be a diversified community. But no, I think it's time to share in commonalities.
the Smith Street Dreaming Project by the Smith Street Working Group in Victoria. They've received an award of $5,000 and a certificate of merit. This is a locality-based project in Smith Street, a well-known trading precinct in the city of Yarra. Since settlement, it's been a place of belonging and gathering for Indigenous Australians. The street presents a complex mix of challenging issues. The project has built relationships of respect between the local Aboriginal communities, the Smith Street businesses, Victoria Police and the wider community to bring about a harmonious coexistence for everyone. It has reduced crime, fear of crime, and importantly built social capital between all the stakeholders. The street's been beautified to increase prosperity and to increase employment opportunities and build an inclusive, peaceful and strong community. That's a culture that epitomises care for one another and is now the tagline for Smith Street Dreaming: one street, many mobs, one community.
We had a lot of tech difficulties on the evening with Hieng. You've just watched the recording that about the Smith Street Dreaming, which we weren't able to watch live that night. And this is the slide that Hieng will be talking to in a moment. Yeah.
I think, was it Alex who asked about how did we get the community involved? Yeah. If you look at the Smith Street Dreaming, which was a music festival, that's one way of how we got the community involved. A really specific and direct way, Alex, was to invite elders and community members to become marshals on the day and pay them a stipend for their services. You're not going to get any involvement if you don't pay people who are giving their time for free. That's just part of doing business. And the other thing to say is that you've got to pay them in the right way. So I got in big trouble because my department only allowed me to give Safeway cards. Now, can you imagine how they would be received? Yeah, not well. And I was called racist, and I brought Northern Territory law to Smith. Yeah. So you have to deal with all of that, and you have to be open to learning. And sometimes you cry, and then you move forward, and then you learn, and then they know that you're learning, and so you've got to persist. And it's not an easy place to be because you think you're doing what's best, and you're limited by the bureaucracy. You're limited by what support structure you have to do this work. And the way we do work in an institutional way, it's racist because it doesn't understand the way people expect. For example, to this day, we still have an issue, and this is a general issue, of helping Aboriginal people because they don't have papers. They don't have identity. And if you don't have identity, you don't get serviced. But yeah. Aboriginal people don't have identity papers. It's just a fact. And
well, not all, but certainly those that are living rough or being displaced. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Look, so getting to work, I wanted to share that clearly these are some of the things that we had to do. And listening is a huge part. And this is where I guess the core skills for peace building and the core skill of mediation comes in. So my mediation training and as a mediator really stood up to the challenge. Listening without judging, being neutral, being respectful without not handing the torch to the people following you in the tunnel, but holding it and saying, come this way, I'll show you the way. What happens if you hand a torch over? You could both get lost. They stub it out on the wall of the cave and you're in trouble. So you have to hold on to some processes, be very flexible with the processes, be very respectful with what you do in the process, get agreement that this is the process they will follow. So then you change all the time and be flexible and say, look, we're going to do this now. Are you okay with that? Do you agree to that? And that's where you then get your mode of operation, your modus operandi, to say, okay, this is how we're going to work together. We agree on that. We'll seek your input as we go. And that's done out of respect, right? And really, number 3 is really important to the work that I did, which was to believe that there's good in everyone. Yeah, you have to believe it.
Yeah.
But number 2 is also important. Believe it can be done. So people will tell you it can't be done. It can't be done, Hieng. We've done this. And the bureaucrats will tell you it can't be done. So you got to actually believe it can be done. And then find champions that share that vision, right? Persist with difficulties, with difficult conversations, and compromise. So what I'd like to say, the work, I think somebody asked, is the work continuing today? One of the videos that I was going to show was that I handed the stewardship of it back to community because it was our judgment, it was my judgment that it belonged to community and the community should handle it. Now, one of the things I want to mention, you heard Di there say, I humbly went away. And I think one fault that I had was I was too humble. That means you don't get these things shared and you don't get a good work noticed and therefore propagated. So you have to be a bit, no, we did good work. We did good work. There was good outcome. So if you look up, Smith Street has now become the coolest street in the world, right? Voted by 27,000 readers of some magazine, I don't know what, but you can look it up, coolest street in the world. That's not by accident. And if you ask people who don't know the story behind all the work, they think it's just Smith Street Dreaming. So Smith Street Dreaming is the festival. It's the work of the Smith Street Working Group to build relationship that's important. It's not the festival. Otherwise, we could solve all Aboriginal problems with a festival, a music festival. They're everywhere. The relationship is what's important. The respect you build is what's important. To this day, the senior sergeants walking down the street. So before I said the senior sergeants would arrest, to this day, they would look at each other and call each other by name and give each other a hug. So Uncle Joe Boy gives Peter Beckers a hug when he walks down the street. Can you imagine that? So that was based on the, if I know your name, I'm not going to disrespect you. If I know Joanne, I'm not going to assault her. She's part of my community. That was what we built it on. That if we sit in a room, share a meal, know each other, call each other by name, and begin to normalize relationship, we can live together and coexist in peace and work towards a better community, a better street.
Yeah.
Right?
Hang on, we've only got a few more minutes, and I'm just wondering if you'd be interested in hearing from those that are here. What are the key takeaways or key thoughts, or if there's still a nagging question that you've got?
No, absolutely. I'd rather hear questions than.
Oh, I'm not trying to shut you up because you've got.
No, not at all. I would rather hear questions because questions elucidate much more.
Yeah. No, Dennis.
Hey, Hank, can you hear me?
Yes, Dennis.
Yeah, nice one. Thank you. Thanks for allowing me to speak. That was definitely worth it. I'm running out of fuel though, but yeah, there are heaps of questions I'd like to ask you, probably offline another time. It's great to see little signs of hope like this. Not that long ago, Commissioner Murphy in the NT made a really important speech at Gama. I don't know if you listened in, but we don't have enough of those speeches in this country, and you're totally right about a scar in our consciousness, not even close to the intergenerational trauma that goes on. But yeah, I just need to know, we need to make a little short film about this. We need to get Adam Briggs, we need to get you on Koori Radio in Sydney as a template. I wouldn't underestimate what you've done or what you've continued to do. I posed a question there in the chat. Does the community recognize that it is a success story?
Look, you probably know a bit about the community. There's a lot of lateral things that happen, and I don't know whether you all know what I mean by that, but if you don't, it means that there's competition between families and stakeholders. I gave the project back to the community. So the parkies, it was when I handed it over, it was to Charcoal Lane and the parkies. They co-chaired. Charcoal Lane promised that they would bring funding. Charcoal Lane is now closed. So Yarra City Council continues to put on the music festival, but that's where I'm sharing with you that it's not the music festival that is what makes the difference. It's the relationship that you build. Yes, I totally agree with you, Dennis. It's just a different way of thinking. I'm happy to have another conversation with lots of questions if you want, but I'm honoured that you all stayed. I know you must be so hungry and not having had dinner and all that. Yeah.
Thank you.
No.
I'll leave it there for the moment, Dennis, but yeah, happy to answer any questions.
Yeah. Any Nalika or Alex?
No, it's very interesting. This reminds quite a lot of projects I have been involved in. Quite often what's happened, yes, even though the community recognizes the broader impact, then that competing interest as well as the lack of resource, then everything go into...
One thing I will say is that success has many parents and failure an orphan. So a lot of people claim, for example, like all the work that I did walking the street just to connect with the traders. It's funny because Smith Street now has a nice ice creamery, and they came in when we were doing that work, and they said, "Oh, we were the ones who cleaned up the street." and that was, I was walking down that and with Peter Beckers and Di Harris, and we just about killed over.
Yeah.
And then, but the other thing was unintended consequences. Once the street was cleaned and became a good place for everyone, the rent went up 30% and 60%, and a lot of the old traders were kicked out. Yeah, so there's not always a happy ending for everyone.
Yeah.
I'll leave it there because I think we're running out of time.
Yeah, we're definitely out of time, but there's certainly a lot more juice that could be taken out of this. And I guess the reason I asked Hieng to come and share with us is I can just imagine all of the hard work and trying to understand and knowing what to do. And yes, how do you continue it on and all of that? But if you start not from the start and you start from the middle, there's more room to grow.
Yes.
And that's what I don't want, these amazing projects and these amazing people and this foundation of respect to not be shared and propagated.
Oh, thank you so much, Joanne, for coordinating and for Heng. I'll echo what Judith has said in the chat. Just, it was such a fascinating story, and it really is just so beneficial to hear other people's practice and experiences. And I think it was even Judith who said earlier, I can already imagine how some of the things that you've discussed could be relevant in other streets that she knows in Cairns, and I'm sure the rest of us as well. I was really taken particularly by your point that sometimes having that little bit of naivety is actually quite powerful in a role. So thank you for being just, you mentioned humble, you were very humble, but just honest and authentic in the way you described what actually happened and when in that context. It was really wonderful. So yeah, very heartfelt thanks to you for sharing your story with us tonight.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks, Joanne. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for everyone who's attended as well and stayed all the way through to the end. The plan now is at some point in the near future, we will take some snippets of the recording and just put up some little bite-sized chunks of great ideas or the points that you've made, Heng, about your practice. So there will be some things that will be shared through. We've got a YouTube channel with MBBO. And if anyone wants to stay connected so that you're aware of some other webinars that will be available through the Experiential Learning Working Group at MBBO, please follow us on LinkedIn, which is where we'll share those, and maybe consider becoming a member of MBBO. That would be wonderful. So please feel free to reach out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you once again, Heng. It's absolutely fabulous. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Heng.
Everyone, have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.